Gearbox narrative director and the lead writer on Borderlands 3 and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands has decided to attack gamers while parroting Sweet Baby Inc. talking points. And then after he attacked gamers, what does he do? Of course, he plays the victim. Before we get into all of this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Wrote this up over at That Park Place this morning. And Sam Winkler, as I said, the narrative director at Gearbox and the lead writer on Borderlands 3 and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, decided to describe gamers as bigots while parroting Sweet Baby Inc. talking points. Specifically, he claims that gamers don't know how to make video games. And this is a talking point we've seen from numerous Sweet Baby Inc. employees, including the company's co-founder, David Bedard. So let's get into this right here. Winkler posted this on X. He posted a screenshot on X that reads, a good narrative writer of any skin color can write a good character with another skin color without needing consultants. If your studio can't do that, get a better writer. That is 100% true. And Winkler decided to take issue with that. And this is what he wrote. He said, I see this argument all the time against DEI and consultancy, and it just highlights the total misunderstanding of what being a good writer is. You don't somehow max out your stats and learn how to write every conceivable character, plot, or prose style. I think he's telling on himself right there, revealing that he is not a good writer. Nevertheless, he goes on and says, knowing you aren't ready, or aren't the right person to write something is one of the chief skills for a pro writer. Ideally, you have a team that can cover all your bases, but if you have a gap, you hire an outside expert, just like in literally any effing other industry. Just further evidence that 99.99% of the people spewing this crap have never created a single thing in their lives that they're proud of. So there is the Sweet Baby Inc. narrative that he is parroting. Gamers just don't know what they're talking about. They don't know how the bread is baked. But then he goes on to attack them and he says, and the rest are just straight up bigots. So there you go. Sam Winkler parroting Sweet Baby Inc. talking points and then calling gamers bigots. I mean, as I said, this is the narrative that Sweet Baby Inc. has been running throughout the month of March. Here is what Maya Kramer, a Sweet Baby Inc. employee, uses the handle Lego Butts on X, posted at the end of February while trying to cancel the Steam curator list created by Brazilian gamer Cabrutus Rambo. This is what Kramer wrote. The other part of this is, it doesn't matter if you tell them the truth. They think DEI just steps in and changes whole games. The creators are forced by some unseen hand, the government, BlackRock, I guess, as well as just POC in general, to make games more inclusive. So she's again implying that gamers don't realize why these DEI initiatives are being pushed in video game companies, despite the overwhelming amount of evidence that I have documented and others have documented about this that show that, yes, it is the government and BlackRock doing it. Kramer then went on and said, fighting misinformation would be great, but social media plus YouTube is not equipped to hold people accountable to doing real research in good faith. Just getting hits and proving their point in the absence of confirmation. It's wild out there. Nothing has changed. So again, claiming that people don't really know what's going on. She then said, sorry, no one thing has changed. The number of people who understand that spreading misinformation just lets them be racist. So there you go. Not only is Kramer calling people... not only is Kramer saying that people do not understand how video games are being made, but then she calls them racist. Sounds very similar to Sam Winkler, doesn't it? With no consequence has increased dramatically. That has changed. Probably requires some fighting from those with authority. And that's when she goes on to call for people with authority to silence the Steam curator list. But clearly, that was the narrative that Sweet Baby Inc. was pushing from the very get-go. And we saw this even more recently with the co-founder, David Bedard. He posted a similar claim on LinkedIn. He wrote this: for the past 4 months, my company, Sweet Baby Inc., has been targeted by a far-right harassment campaign conspiracy theory. This is a rough situation for me, my co-founder, Kim Belair, our entire team, and our collaborators. More than the frustrations caused by the harassment and the procedures we're putting in place as a result of that, the toughness comes from the fact that this entire campaign is based on misinformation. Misinformation so wild in left field or right field, I guess, that it's impossible to even engage with it to combat it. So he's claiming that gamers don't know what they're doing and they're being misinformed. And then he's saying that he's the victim of a far-right harassment campaign. Sounds very similar to Sam Winkler. Sounds very similar to Maya Kramer. Again, this Sam Winkler guy is running the same narrative that Sweet Baby Inc. is running, and he is accusing gamers of being bigots. He's the one who launched the attack. So if we want to actually address Winkler's argument that you need to hire writers based on identity to write other characters, let's just like get into that. On its face, it's just absurd and it's stupid. It leads to box office and financial disaster, as we've seen in Hollywood. Just look at all of the movies that are all identity based. They have been complete and utter disasters. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been just trash for the last 5 years, and they're finally seeing they're reaping what they've sown. The Marvels did not even gross $200 million at the box office. Its production budget last we saw was $267 million. Huge amounts of money lost by the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios. And you can just look at Marvel and DC Comics too if you want. They completely hide sales data now because it's so terrible. They don't even show their sales data anymore. They don't publicly reveal it at all anymore. And then just on its face, as I said, you don't need to be black to write a black character. You don't need to be white to write white characters. You don't need to be Chinese to be able to write a Chinese character. There are a plethora of examples of authors and writers able to create and write numerous characters without their identity matching those characters. One of those is Christopher Priest, and he addressed this ridiculously stupid argument that Sam Winkler made back in 2018 in an interview with comicbook.com. This is what he said. He said, so I got a call from DC and they wanted to talk to me about Cyborg. I gave them the standard stump speech. I don't want to be a black writer. When did I become a black writer? I used to be a guy who would write Spider-Man, Deadpool, and Batman. Why am I no longer qualified to write those characters? How did I get typecast from writing Black Panther of all things when that series was never really about Black Panther? It was about the white guy, about Ross. It was narrated through his voice, and I thought I wrote a very well-constructed white character. Why are you now pigeonholing me as a guy who can only write black characters? So he's obviously referring to his run on Black Panther there. He continued and said, I later found out that Marvel, and to a lesser extent DC, moved into a trend where they were no longer hiring writers. They were casting writers. They're listening to chatter on Twitter, insisting that only a black lesbian writer could write a black lesbian character, and that's nonsense. A writer writes. Tom Clancy, rest his soul, could write anything. A writer writes. All of a sudden, I was no longer qualified to write anybody that didn't look like me, and I resented that. I was really polite about it and told DC, thank you for calling, blah, blah, blah. So there's Christopher Priest just absolutely destroying this disgusting argument that Sam Winkler is making. What? He did this in 2018. It's now 2024. 6 years ago. 6 years ago. Christopher Priest is dismantling and destroying this argument, yet Sam Winkler is still out here parroting it and pushing the casting by identity in order to write certain characters. What a joke. Eventually, Priest did get a call back from DC, and they brought him on to Deathstroke, and he was able to cut a deal with them to do Deathstroke. But as you can expect, here is how Sam Winkler responded to people responding to him, calling them bigots. He paints himself as the victim. He wrote this. He wrote this. I've muted the threads for obvious reasons, but I want to say this. If you don't like my work, that's okay. It doesn't really bother me. Public criticism is invaluable. What bothers me is when you feel like you need to use your finite time on this earth to try and make someone feel bad. Like you did when you called people bigots, when you said they didn't understand how the video game industry works, when you belittled them and patronized them and mocked them. These people always project. They always project. They lie and then they project. These are the rules, and Sam Winkler is following them. I've had uncountable civil conversations with fans and haters alike who want to understand why a plot point happened or why a favorite character never showed up. I've always shown up for that, but some of y'all have truly screwed up your priorities. Are you even having fun? I could hate a game's writing, and it wouldn't occur to me in a million years to heckle the writer or threaten them or tell them to stop writing. Well, that's probably not why they were responding to you, Sam Winkler. They're probably responding to you because you called them bigots and lied to their face saying they didn't know how video games were made and made the utterly evil, ridiculous argument that you need to be casting writers based on their race in order to write other characters. That is why they're probably criticizing you about this stuff now. Because what could I gain from that? What could they? If you love games, go play them. Go talk to friends about them. He then tries to grandstand and position himself as having the moral high ground here. He says, "This has made me feel bad, but not for myself. I feel bad for all the people who got shouted down and stopped making things. I feel bad for the stress writers feel about how they'll be treated. And I feel bad for you because you are honestly, truly, deeply wasting your time." Except he just wrote this 4-post thread. Who knows how long he thought about it? Who knows how long he toiled over it? I'm pretty sure he's probably spent a significant time on it. But there you go. He launches an attack on gamers, calls them bigots, says they don't know what they're doing, doesn't understand how video games are made, makes a ridiculous race-based identity argument about how you need to write characters, which is just objectively wrong. Gets a bunch of flack, rightfully so, and then paints himself as the victim. You just can't make it up. These people are awful, awful. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know what you make of what Sam Winkler had to say here. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.